So we had a big development actually in a big case, and unfortunately, I could not find pictures of these guys on the internet, which is another thing about these older guys, man, because they're not on social media like some of these younger guys are. But there's been 4 GD leaders sentenced to really long terms, man, life sentences for 4 of the leaders and 32 years for another one. This is something that has been going on for a while in the courts, a sweeping federal investigation of a crew of GDs, and these were like leaders of the GDs. And I think when I say leaders this time, I think this is actually accurate because this was not really in Chicago, and it was like older guys, guys where there's actually structure. Like the older guys still have structure. Okay, we're not talking about teenagers here. These were guys like in their 40s, 50s. Ended on Thursday this investigation with a life sentence for a Naperville man. Naperville is a town out to the west of Chicago. His name is Frank Smith. He's among 5 regional and national leaders of the gang sentenced this year on racketeering charges. So he's 50. There's a guy named Walter Griffin, a guy named Sean Clement, and a guy named Dominique Maxwell. They were convicted by a jury after a 6-week trial, and a guy named Anthony Dobbins pled guilty. All got life terms except for Dobbins, who was sentenced to 32 years in prison. So Griffin is from Glenwood. Clement, Maxwell, and Dobbins are from Southern Illinois. So these guys are not really from Chicago. So Frank Smith, his street name is Little Frank, a.k.a. Redbeard. And so he got life. Warren Griffin, his street name is GG, and also Big Head. He's 54, and he got life. Sean Clement, his street name is Pops. He's 53. He's actually from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. He was sentenced to life in prison back on July 19th. A guy named Dominique Maxwell, his street name is D-Mac. And another street name he has is Monster. He's also from Cape Girardeau. He's only 31, but he was sentenced to life. And Anthony Dobbins' street name is Crazy, and also Tony Rome. He's 55. He's from East St. Louis, Illinois. He was sentenced to 32 years. So Smith, Griffin, Clement, and Maxwell were convicted of racketeering, conspiracy, murder, and aid of racketeering, and related firearms offenses after a 6-week jury trial. Dobbins pled guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, murder, and aid of racketeering, and related firearms offenses. So Clement and Maxwell, on orders from Smith, fatally shot a Gangster Disciples member. So they killed one of the guys from their own gang at a Missouri park in April of 2018. They said Smith texted, quote, Mike Tyson Punch-Out to Maxwell prior to the shooting. So the following month, Griffin and Dobbins actually drove from Southern Illinois to the south side of Chicago to kill a Gangster Disciples board member because he opposed their leadership positions. Okay, this is according to prosecutors. So he was against them being leaders. So they drove to the south side of Chicago and had him killed. So according to prosecutors, that was how that went down. And they said that Dobbins shot the man in the face and back. So according to the indictment charging the men, Dobbins told Griffin in September of 2014 that Larry Hoover had appointed them as board members for the gang. And for people who don't know what's going on, Larry Hoover's he's like the top guy in the GDs, but he's doing life. And he's in like a super max. Like nobody can really communicate with him, which is why this is kind of like, I don't know whether to believe this or not. In 2021, Hoover's lawyer said this. He said he doubted that Hoover could have promoted gang members in prison while he was being held under high security. So, I mean, Larry Hoover's like on, he's on like total lockdown and everything, man. But according to court documents, the 5 defendants were national and regional leaders of the GDs, a criminal organization with a presence throughout the United States, including in federal and state prisons. The gang employs a structured hierarchy with leadership positions such as national board members and state governors. As part of their efforts to maintain control of the gang, the defendants murdered 2 other Gangster Disciples leaders who opposed their regime. This is according to the government. They said the sentences in this case send a clear message to the members of violent criminal organizations across the country. You will be investigated and you will be held accountable for your crimes. And they said, as this investigation shows, the ATF has no higher priority than leveraging crime, gun intelligence, and working with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners to disrupt the violence perpetrated by these groups. On April 28th of 2018, Clement and Maxwell, on orders from Smith, fatally had shot that GD leader and injured 2 other men. It was in a public park in Bridgeton, Missouri. So this is far from Chicago. And that shooting was part of a leadership dispute in which Smith and Griffin, who were both board members, wanted to remove another Gangster Disciples member from his position as governor in Missouri. So that was where he had sent that text, Mike Tyson Punch-Out. They said it didn't necessarily mean murder, but it was like it meant extreme violence. So the gang members fired more than 70 shots during the attack. Both Clement and Maxwell were promoted to leadership positions within the gang after committing this murder. Then on May 18, 2018, board members Griffin and Dobbins drove to the south side to murder that former powerful board member because he opposed their status as leaders in the gang. Griffin lured the victim into the street, and Dobbins came up behind the victim and shot him 3 times in the back and once in the face. The defendant's other acts of violence included a nightclub stabbing in East St. Louis and another shooting in Cape Girardeau. The GD's members also engaged in various acts of drug trafficking, including a scheme to smuggle the synthetic drug K2 into Missouri state prisons. But you guys notice a very interesting thing about this case is that they were whacking their own homies. Like, they were whacking members of their own organization. And they said they whacked the one guy because they wanted to become leaders, and he was opposed to that. He was already a leader, and so they had him whacked. And then they actually got appointed as leaders. They didn't get punished for what they did. They actually, got rewarded for it, at least within the gang. Now, they got punished in the long run by the law, but it's like the mob. They were whacking their own guys. And this is how it goes. Like, I notice a lot of times with, later on when the guys get older, with the leadership and everything at stake. Okay, well, now things start to get really like homie versus homie. The whole dynamic changes when you got the structure. Because a lot of these guys may not even know each other. They join the gang, okay, they're making money. They can make even more money if they get to a higher position. This guy's in the way, so what are we going to do? And then it turns into, the beast turns in on itself and starts eating itself. But, definitely no loyalty in that type of thing. Definitely not. I can see with the younger guys with some of these cliques how that's a little different. But even there, a lot of guys start turning on each other after a while over, like, little stuff. Sometimes even stuff even more trivial than that, like, female fighting over female and stuff. I mean, you guys have seen what's going on with that, like, in the streets a lot over here with the younger generation. But yeah, definitely one reason I would never do it. You definitely can't trust your own homies in this type of thing because they'll be your worst enemies. When you see a report, I'm out.